A wounded Marine struggled through a cafeteria line when cruel strangers mocked her cane and questioned her service. They laughed, calling her fake and worthless. But 4 Navy SEALs sitting nearby saw everything. What happened next would change those mockers forever and teach everyone a lesson about respect they would never forget. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The morning sun shone brightly across the Military Medical Center in San Diego. Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez walked slowly through the busy hallway. Her left leg was still healing from the bomb blast that hit her convoy in Afghanistan 6 months ago. Each step reminded her of that terrible day when her life changed forever. Maria had always been proud of her Marine uniform. But now it felt different. The fabric seemed heavier, not just from her injuries, but from the invisible scars that went deeper than any doctor could reach. Her confident walk was gone. Now she moved carefully with a walking cane in her right hand. The medical center was full of activity. Doctors in white coats rushed past with their clipboards. Nurses moved quickly, their soft shoes squeaking on the polished floors. Everywhere there were service members recovering, each carrying their own stories of sacrifice and survival. Maria's destination was the physical therapy wing. She spent 3 hours there every day working to rebuild the strength in her damaged leg. The exercises were hard. Each movement was a battle against what her body could not do. But she pushed forward with the same determination that carried her through basic training and 2 combat tours. Giving up was not in her vocabulary. As she walked through the crowded main lobby, Maria noticed the looks from people around her. Some looked at her with respect, recognizing the sacrifice her injuries represented. Others seemed uncomfortable, as if her visible wounds reminded them of things they preferred not to think about. And some looked right through her, as if she were invisible. Maria had learned to hold her head high despite the whispers and stares. She knew her worth as a Marine and as a human being was not less because of the shrapnel that tore through her leg or the scars on her skin. But knowing something in your mind and feeling it in your heart were 2 different things. Her physical therapist, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, had become more than just a medical professional. She was a friend, a supporter, and sometimes a voice of reason when dark thoughts came. Today's session would focus on balance and coordination, building on the progress Maria had made in recent weeks. The therapy room was filled with special equipment to help wounded warriors get their mobility back. Maria knew every piece of equipment well, understanding how each one helped her journey back to wholeness. The therapy session began with warm-up exercises to prepare her muscles for harder work ahead. Maria moved through the routine with practiced precision. Her body responded to the familiar commands despite its limits. Lieutenant Commander Chen watched carefully, making notes and giving encouragement as Maria pushed through each exercise. As the morning went on, other patients came in and out of the therapy room. There was Corporal Jackson, a young soldier learning to walk again after losing his leg below the knee. His positive attitude lifted everyone around him. There was Navy Petty Officer Williams working to use her arm again after a training accident. Her quiet determination showed the strength beneath her gentle exterior. These fellow warriors had become Maria's family during her recovery. They understood each other's struggles in ways outsiders never could. They celebrated small victories together and supported each other during setbacks. As her session ended, Maria felt the familiar mix of exhaustion and accomplishment that came with pushing her limits. Her leg ached, her muscles shook with fatigue, but her spirit felt stronger. Each day in this room was a step toward taking back her life. After therapy, Maria made her way to the medical center's main cafeteria. Her stomach growled with hunger that always followed her intense physical work. The hallways had grown busier as lunch hour approached. The cafeteria buzzed with conversation as Maria entered. She joined the line at the serving counter, her cane clicking softly against the floor as she moved forward slowly. The smell of fresh bread and hot soup made her mouth water. Behind her in line stood a group of young civilians, visitors who appeared to be in their early 20s. They spoke loudly about their weekend plans. Maria paid them little attention at first, focused on deciding between the soup options. As the line moved forward, Maria's careful pace created a small gap between herself and the person in front of her. This was normal for her now. Moving through crowds required extra time and attention to keep her balance. "Come on, seriously," one of the young men behind her muttered, his voice loud enough for several people to hear. "Some people need to learn how to move faster. This is ridiculous." Maria felt her cheeks flush but continued moving forward, telling herself that perhaps he was not talking about her. "I know, right?" his companion said, equally loud and thoughtless. "Look at her with that stick. Why doesn't she just order delivery if she can't move like a normal person? Some of us have places to be." The words hit Maria like a physical blow. She gripped her cane tighter, her knuckles turning white as she fought to stay composed. Around her, other people in line began to notice the conversation. Some looked uncomfortable while others pretended not to hear. A third voice joined in, belonging to a young woman whose tone was full of contempt. "Maybe she's faking it for attention. You know how some people are, always looking for sympathy. Probably got that cane from a costume shop." The comments continued as Maria reached the serving counter. Each word cut deeper than the last. Her hands shook slightly as she pointed to her selections. Her appetite disappeared as the weight of their judgment settled over her. "Military people think they're so special," the first young man continued. "Walking around like they deserve special treatment just because they chose to join up. My tax dollars probably pay for whatever's wrong with her." The suggestion that her wounds were fake or that her service was meaningless struck at the very core of who she was. Her hands trembled as she tried to pay for her meal. The simple task became very difficult under their mocking eyes. "Bet she never even saw real combat," the young woman added with a laugh. "Probably hurt herself in basic training or something. And now she's using it to get all the benefits she can." The cafeteria had grown quieter around them. Other people sensed the tension building. Some looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Others shook their heads in disapproval but failed to speak up. The silence of the bystanders felt almost as painful as the words themselves. Maria finally managed to pay for her meal and began the slow journey to find a table. Each step felt heavier than usual, weighed down not just by her physical limits but by the emotional burden of the encounter. She could hear them still talking behind her, their voices following her across the cafeteria. Finding an empty table near the window, Maria sat down carefully and tried to focus on her meal. But the food tasted like cardboard. She stared out at the parking lot, wondering how people who had never served could be so quick to judge those who had. The young group eventually got their food and sat at a table across the room. Their laughter carried over the general noise. Every burst of amusement felt directed at her. Maria knew she was probably imagining some of it, but the fear was a natural response to such public shame. She thought about the Marines she had served with, the bonds formed in combat that these strangers could never understand. She remembered the weight of her gear as she walked dangerous streets, the trust she placed in her fellow warriors, and the moment when everything changed in a flash of fire and shrapnel. As Maria sat alone with her untouched meal, she felt tears beginning to form in her eyes. She blinked them back, refusing to give these strangers the satisfaction of seeing her break down. Her service meant something. Her sacrifice had value. But right now, surrounded by the noise of the cafeteria, Maria felt very alone. At a table near the back of the cafeteria, 4 Navy SEALs sat finishing their lunch. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Thompson, a veteran with over 15 years of service, was explaining the afternoon training exercise when the cruel comments began floating across the dining area. Petty Officer First Class Jake Martinez was the first to notice the problem. As a sniper, he was used to observing details others might miss. The sight of a female Marine being publicly mocked immediately caught his attention. He nudged his teammate, Petty Officer Second Class Alex Chen. "You hearing this garbage?" Jake whispered, his jaw clenching as the young civilians continued their verbal attack. His hands formed fists on the table as he watched Maria struggle to stay composed. Chief Thompson followed his team's gaze and immediately understood the situation. He had seen too many wounded warriors struggle with civilian interactions. He recognized the signs of someone trying desperately to hold on to their dignity in the face of cruel ignorance. The fourth member, Petty Officer Second Class David Kim, had his face grow dark as he listened. His own memories of wounded teammates flooded back. He had held the hand of a dying Marine in Afghanistan and seen firsthand the true cost of military service. "That Marine deserves better than this," Chief Thompson said quietly. "Those kids have no idea what they're talking about. And they're about to learn a lesson they'll never forget." The SEALs continued to watch as Maria made her way to her table. Each step was clearly difficult but executed with precision and determination. They observed how other people noticed but failed to step in. Jake Martinez felt his anger building. As the son of a Vietnam veteran who had struggled with PTSD, Jake understood the extra burden that thoughtless civilians could place on already wounded warriors. "Chief, we need to do something," Alex Chen said, his usually calm manner showing cracks of frustration. Alex had joined the Navy to honor his grandfather's memory, a World War II veteran who had taught him deep respect for military service. "Look at her," Chief Thompson said, nodding toward Maria. "That Marine has probably seen more action and shown more courage in one tour than those kids will show in their entire lives. And they have the nerve to mock her for wounds she earned serving them." The chief's words carried the weight of personal experience. He had served alongside female Marines in Iraq and Afghanistan, witnessing their skill, bravery, and dedication under the most challenging circumstances. "Those kids need to understand something," Jake said, his voice low but filled with determination. "They need to learn that their freedom to sit here and run their mouths comes at a price that warriors like her have paid. We can't just sit here and let this continue," David said quietly. "That Marine has earned better treatment than this. And those civilians need to learn there are consequences for their actions." Chief Thompson nodded slowly, his mind already forming a plan that would teach the young group a lesson without turning the situation into something that could reflect poorly on the military. Chief Thompson stood up from his table with deliberate movements. His three teammates recognized the look in his eyes, the same focused determination that had carried them through countless missions. "Gentlemen," the chief said quietly. "It's time these young people learned something about the woman they're mocking. Follow my lead, stay professional, and remember we're representing more than just ourselves here." The four SEALs moved across the cafeteria with smooth coordination. Their approach was casual enough not to alarm the young civilians but purposeful enough to command attention. Other diners sensed something important was about to happen. Chief Thompson positioned himself directly in front of the table where the group sat, still laughing. His presence was immediately commanding. The laughter gradually died away as the civilians noticed the four imposing figures surrounding them. "Excuse me," Chief Thompson said, his voice calm but carrying an undertone that suggested this was not casual. "I couldn't help but hear your comments about the Marine sitting over there. I think there are some things you should know about her before you continue." The young man who had started the cruel comments looked up with surprise and annoyance. "Look, man, we're just having a private conversation here. I don't know who you think you are, but you need to mind your own business." Jake Martinez stepped forward slightly. "Actually, when you mock a wounded warrior in public, you make it everyone's business. Especially when that warrior has sacrificed more for this country than you'll probably ever understand." The young woman at the table rolled her eyes. "Oh great, here comes the military speech. We have freedom of speech in this country, you know. We can say whatever we want." Alex Chen nodded thoughtfully. "You're absolutely right about freedom of speech. You do have that right. But that Marine over there, the one you've been mocking, she's one of the people who fought to keep that right for you. She bled for it." Chief Thompson pulled out his phone and began scrolling through photos. "Let me tell you about Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez. She served 2 combat tours in Afghanistan, leading Marines in some of the most dangerous territory in that country. She was awarded the Purple Heart after her convoy was hit by a bomb that killed 2 of her Marines and nearly cost her her leg. The atmosphere at the table shifted dramatically. The weight of real information replaced the ignorant assumptions. The young people began to realize their casual cruelty had targeted someone whose service and sacrifice were very real. David Kim stepped closer, his voice quiet but intense. While you were probably in college worrying about exams and weekend parties, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez was carrying wounded Marines to safety under enemy fire. She stayed conscious long enough after her own injury to make sure her surviving Marines were evacuated before allowing medics to treat her wounds. The young man who had started the mockery was beginning to look uncomfortable. Look, we didn't know all that. We didn't mean anything serious by it. The problem, Chief Thompson continued, is that you made assumptions about someone based on her visible injuries without knowing anything about how she got them or what they represent. You saw a woman with a cane and decided she was faking or looking for attention. In reality, she earned those injuries serving your country. Jake Martinez gestured toward Maria. That Marine has more courage and integrity in her little finger than most people show in their entire lives. She's fighting every day to recover from wounds she received in service to this nation. And instead of respect and gratitude, she gets mocked by people who have never sacrificed anything. The young woman was beginning to look genuinely ashamed. We really didn't know. I mean, we weren't trying to hurt anyone's feelings. Alex Chen shook his head slowly. Intent doesn't matter as much as impact. Whether you meant to hurt her or not, your words did damage. They added to the burden that wounded warriors already carry. Chief Thompson leaned forward slightly. Here's what's going to happen next. You're going to learn exactly who Staff Sergeant Rodriguez is and what she's accomplished. You're going to understand the true meaning of service and sacrifice. And then you're going to have an opportunity to show that you're better people than your earlier behavior suggested. Chief Thompson settled into an empty chair at the end of the table. The young civilians found themselves about to receive an education that would challenge everything they thought they knew about military service. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez didn't just serve in Afghanistan, the chief began. She volunteered for a second tour when her unit was short-handed, leaving behind a comfortable assignment to return to a war zone where she had already seen friends die. Jake Martinez pulled up a news article on his phone. This is from the Marine Corps Times. It describes the day she was wounded. Her convoy was providing security for a humanitarian mission, delivering medical supplies to a village that had been cut off from aid for months. The young woman stared at the phone screen, reading about the attack that had changed Maria's life forever. Her face went pale as she absorbed the details. Alex Chen continued the story. When the bomb exploded, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez was thrown 15 feet and suffered severe injuries. But instead of waiting for help, she crawled back to the burning vehicle to pull out her Marines. David Kim nodded. She saved the lives of 2 Marines that day, dragging them to safety despite her own injuries. One had lost both legs. The other had severe burns. She applied tourniquets and pressure bandages while under enemy fire. Chief Thompson showed them another photo. Maria receiving her Purple Heart medal in a hospital ceremony. She was in a wheelchair, but her eyes showed determination and pride. This photo was taken 3 weeks after the attack, the chief explained. She was still fighting for her life, but she insisted on the ceremony because she wanted to honor the Marines who didn't make it home. The 2 Marines she saved, Jake Martinez continued, they both survived because of her actions. One went on to design artificial limbs for wounded veterans. The other became a nurse and works in trauma units. The young man slumped in his chair. I had no idea. We just saw someone moving slowly and made assumptions. I feel terrible. Alex Chen leaned forward. That's exactly the problem. You made assumptions based on surface observations. Every wounded warrior in this medical center has a story of service and sacrifice. Every visible injury represents someone who chose to put their life on the line for others. The young woman was now emotional, tears forming. What can we do? How can we make this right? I feel terrible about what we said. The first step, Chief Thompson said, is understanding that your words have power. You have freedom to speak your mind, but with that freedom comes responsibility. The conversation continued as the SEALs shared more stories about military service, combat injuries, and recovery. The young civilians listened carefully. Their earlier ignorance was being replaced by genuine understanding and regret. Feeling sorry isn't enough, the chief said firmly but encouragingly. What separates good people is what they do with that regret. You have an opportunity to turn this into something positive. The young woman wiped tears from her eyes. Tell us what to do, please. Alex Chen pulled out a business card. This is the Wounded Warrior Project. They provide support for veterans like Staff Sergeant Rodriguez. Volunteer with them for at least 20 hours. Meet other wounded warriors and hear their stories. The young man nodded eagerly. Yes, absolutely. Whatever it takes. Chief Thompson continued. Second, research and write a report about the unit Staff Sergeant Rodriguez served with. Learn about their mission, their losses, their sacrifices. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez participates in an adaptive sports program here, Jake Martinez explained. It helps wounded warriors rebuild confidence. The program needs sponsors for equipment and travel. Alex Chin saw understanding dawn. Instead of a personal apology that might embarrass her, make a donation to the program in honor of all wounded warriors. It would benefit her and many others without singling her out. Chief Thompson held up his hand. This isn't about money alone. The donation should come after you've done the work to educate yourselves and volunteer your time. The group was now fully engaged, asking questions and discussing how to spread awareness. The transformation was remarkable. As their conversation continued, Maria finished her meal and began the slow journey from her table. The young civilians watched with new eyes as she walked with quiet dignity. Look at her posture, David Kim said quietly. That's what real strength looks like. The young man stood up suddenly, wanting to approach Maria. Chief Thompson gently stopped him. Not yet. You're not ready. Do the work first. Earn the right to speak with her. Chief Thompson stood up, indicating their encounter was ending. You have contact information, assignments, and a clear path forward. Most importantly, you have the knowledge you need to never make this kind of mistake again. David Kim looked each civilian in the eye. Remember this moment. Remember how it felt to realize you had hurt someone who deserved your respect. Use that feeling to make better choices. And one more thing, Chief Thompson added. Share what you learned today. Don't let your friends and family make the same mistakes. Be the voice that speaks up when you see someone being disrespected. That's how real change happens. The young civilians nodded solemnly, understanding the responsibility they now carried. 6 months later, Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez stood at the starting line of the Marine Corps Marathon. Her racing prosthetic gleamed in the morning sunlight. The adaptive sports program had transformed her from a wounded warrior struggling with self-doubt into a competitive athlete who had rediscovered her strength and purpose. She had no idea her journey had been supported by 4 young people whose lives had been forever changed by that cafeteria encounter. The anonymous donation to the adaptive sports program had funded new equipment and travel expenses. It came with a letter explaining the contributors had learned about the true meaning of service and sacrifice. Chief Thompson watched from the sidelines. The SEAL team attended every competition they could, following her progress and celebrating her victories. For them, defending her honor had been just the beginning. The 4 young civilians had kept every promise. Marcus, who had initiated the mockery, had completed over 200 hours of volunteer work and changed his career to become a specialist in athletic equipment for disabled veterans. Sarah, who had questioned Maria's authenticity, had become a passionate advocate. She organized fundraising events and educated students about military service. She carried photos of wounded warriors and shared their stories. The other two had similarly transformed their shame into lifelong service. One joined the National Guard. The other became a volunteer coordinator for veteran organizations. Jake Martinez stood near the finish line, knowing Maria would complete the marathon despite all challenges. Her determination had become legendary, inspiring others to push beyond what they thought possible. The race began. Maria settled into steady rhythm. Each step was a victory. Each mile was proof that the warrior spirit could not be diminished. She ran not just for herself but for every wounded veteran who had been told they would never achieve their dreams again. As Maria approached the final mile, her stride remained strong. The crowd's cheers grew louder. This race represented more than athletic achievement. It was proof that the human spirit could triumph over any circumstance. Chief Thompson watched with pride as Maria crossed the finish line, her arms raised in victory. She had completed the marathon in impressive time. Her smile was radiant as she accepted her medal. The four young people who had once mocked her were now among her loudest supporters. They understood they were witnessing something far more significant than a race. They were seeing the triumph of a warrior who had refused to let either injuries or cruelty define her limitations. Maria would never learn the full story of what happened in that cafeteria or how it changed so many lives. She continued her recovery and inspiring work, unaware that her quiet dignity had sparked transformation extending far beyond her own journey. The SEALs continued their service, carrying knowledge that sometimes the most important battles are fought with words and education. They had learned that defending a warrior's honor was about preserving the values that made military service meaningful. The lesson taught in that cafeteria became a reminder that respect must be earned through understanding and that every wounded warrior carries a story worthy of honor rather than mockery. Maria Rodriguez continued to run, to heal, and to inspire. Her strength became a beacon for others. And though she never knew about the 4 civilians or the 4 SEALs who defended her honor, her impact was felt by countless people who learned that true heroism is about how we carry ourselves despite our wounds. The story became a lesson for all who heard it, a reminder that in every interaction, we choose to tear down or build up, to judge or understand, to remain silent or speak up for those who deserve respect. The lesson continues to echo wherever veterans struggle, wherever the choice must be made between cruelty and kindness, between judgment and understanding, between silence and courage. And in that echo lives the hope that every wounded warrior will find defenders, that every act of cruelty will meet education, and that every sacrifice will receive the honor it deserves. The impact of that single cafeteria encounter rippled outward in ways no one could have predicted. The 4 young civilians who had learned such a powerful lesson became ambassadors for change in their own communities. They did not just complete their assignments and move on. They made supporting wounded warriors a permanent part of their lives. Marcus organized monthly awareness events at local colleges, sharing his story of ignorance and transformation. He spoke honestly about his mistakes and the education he received from the SEALs. His presentations were raw and emotional, often bringing audiences to tears. But more importantly, they brought about change in how people viewed and treated veterans. Sarah started a scholarship fund for children of wounded warriors. She raised thousands of dollars through charity runs, bake sales, and social media campaigns. She wore a bracelet with Maria's unit information on it, though Maria would never know. Every time someone asked about it, Sarah seized the opportunity to educate them about military sacrifice. The other 2 young people were equally committed. One created a documentary about wounded warriors in adaptive sports programs. The film won awards at several festivals and was shown in schools across the country. The other developed a mobile app connecting volunteers with veteran support organizations, making it easier for people to get involved and make a difference. The SEALs continued their quiet work of defending and supporting wounded warriors. They made it standard practice to attend adaptive sports events, not for recognition but because they believed it was their duty. Chief Thompson often told new team members about the cafeteria incident, using it as a teaching moment about the importance of standing up for fellow service members in all situations, not just combat. Jake Martinez went on to become an instructor, and he incorporated lessons about civilian-military relations into his training programs. He taught young SEALs that their duty to protect extended beyond the battlefield and into everyday interactions. He emphasized that sometimes the most important weapon was not a gun but the courage to speak up when someone was being treated unfairly. Alex Chen brought his children to volunteer at veteran centers regularly. He wanted them to grow up understanding the true cost of freedom and the importance of honoring those who paid that price. His daughter eventually wrote a school essay about Maria Rodriguez that won a state competition, further spreading awareness about wounded warriors. David Kim became a liaison between military units and civilian communities, working to bridge the gap in understanding that so often led to situations like the one in the cafeteria. He organized town hall meetings where veterans could share their stories and civilians could ask questions in a safe, respectful environment. Maria herself continued to thrive. She eventually became a mentor in the adaptive sports program, helping newly wounded warriors navigate the difficult journey of recovery. She shared her own struggles openly, including the emotional pain of being judged and misunderstood by civilians. Her honesty helped others feel less alone in their experiences. Though she never learned about the specific incident in the cafeteria, Maria often spoke about the importance of patience and understanding from the public. She encouraged her fellow wounded warriors not to let thoughtless comments define them or diminish their sense of worth. She reminded them that their value was not determined by others' opinions but by their own courage and character. The cafeteria where it all happened became an unlikely symbol of hope and change. Staff members who had witnessed the confrontation often shared the story with new employees, emphasizing the importance of speaking up when they saw injustice. A small plaque was eventually placed near the entrance, though it did not reference the specific incident. It simply read, "Honor all who serve." Years passed, and the 4 young civilians never met Maria face to face. They respected the SEAL's advice to let their actions speak louder than words. They understood that true redemption was not about easing their own guilt but about creating lasting positive change in the world. The story of that day became legend among certain circles. It was shared in military training sessions, veteran support groups, and community gatherings. Each retelling carried the same powerful message: words matter, education changes lives, and standing up for what is right is everyone's responsibility. In the end, one moment of cruelty had sparked a movement of compassion. One act of defense had inspired countless acts of service. And one wounded warrior's quiet dignity had touched more lives than she would ever know, proving that heroism takes many forms and that the ripples of our actions extend far beyond what we can see.